Chairman, Chief Executive, my lords, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it's a pleasure to be able to join you today to help celebrate your 80th anniversary. That sounds a ridiculously long time, doesn't it? When you consider the history of this organisation, I think it is quite remarkable that not only was it set up a just-in-case scenario, it was ready to go when the Second World War started. So somebody had actually thought about the difficulties that the communities would face being moved around the countryside and being in strange places, and how to make best use of the information and to introduce people to areas. That at the end of the war, they had worked so well that nobody thought to pull the plug on them and say, well, that's it, you're not needed anymore. And that's because of the information had become such a key, such a power, and they recognized the power of information. But they also, I think, those volunteers who stepped forward to be part of those original schemes also recognized that it had a broader concept, that it could apply that power of information to a much wider range of individuals and situations. And all the information you kept gaining, all the experience you kept gaining, always had another value to be added to it as somebody else came through the door. And you've been adding on value as an organisation through every individual ever since. People come in with different questions. Your network has increased your ability to add value to the information that you held. And if information, your management of it, your ownership of it, and your ability to pass it on is what's given you such strength. Now, it's a kind of art and a science, isn't it? The art is the individuals who listen, who the key is listening, identify the questions that you need to ask, and how to knit together the information system that you know exists with the problems that come through the door, and being able to identify the right problem, which I think the very first time I went to a Citizens Advice Bureau, being explained to me that it was normally after half an hour of listening and chatting, it was the question they asked you as they were leaving that was the one they should have asked when they first came in the door. Something tells me that some things actually don't change very much, and you still need to be able to do that, to understand where that comes from. Because the technology, the science side of it, has improved out of all recognition. And I have been patron for long enough to have seen the join between the paper and the technology, as many of you have lived through that evolution. But you've also done something which I don't think anybody really expected to happen, which is that you have now made the system work for people. That it may be a technological system, but you're the people who have understood how to make it work, how to still get the information that is required out of an enormously complex technological system. To get that information to where it needs to be is still an art. But the science gives you the access to the amount of information that is now available, which sadly is an awful lot more. Bringing those two talents together is what maintains the importance of Citizens Advice as a network and the volunteers as individuals, knitting those two skills together. And I've also been here long enough to understand that there are real differences in terms of your ability to have stable funding and how well your local communities actually understand the value of the information that you hold. In some areas, that is well understood, well supported. In others, there's a conflict. They seem to think there is another organisation who can do it as well. It never lasts, but it's a very annoying habit when they go through this process until they really learn the value of Citizens Advice and what it has to offer is so much better than any other models around. And the reason for that is the people. And as your Chief Executive rightly says, you don't do it because it's a as a job round the corner in the Citizens Advice Bureau. No. You do it because you want to invest your own time and effort into other people, people that you know, people that you don't know, skills that you've acquired and skills that you continue to acquire as part of being a volunteer in a range of different roles within the Citizens Advice Network. The challenge of bringing in new advisors, new trustees, will always continue. I'm sure that's true, as indeed is raising awareness of Citizens Advice role and this extraordinary combination of what is seen virtually as a national organisation, but it is fundamentally a charity for whom the volunteers are the key to making it work, and that the fundraising is vital to maintaining your presence where you need it to be. And raising that awareness will remain, I think, an issue for many. And there will be something that will happen in your local areas which will raise the profile of the Citizens Advice Network and the individuals in it. And that'll be all right for a year or two. But doing that across all of the network at the same time is a bit of a challenge. And I really do think celebrating 80 years will help to do that, help to make sure that people understand the role you have in their communities. And those individuals for whom you made such an important impact will be able to spread the word a little bit more. I personally think that there is no way that communities can survive without this level of assistance. Partly because however good the technology is, and the Internet of Things is an extraordinary development, but for people who face problems, the Internet is not a very friendly place to go. And the Internet produces so much information that your ability to understand what is relevant to you actually becomes almost more difficult rather than easier. You need a special skill to do it. You will know from experience that forms are not quite as easy as some people like to think they are. I've long since come to the conclusion that people who write forms are not interested in the answer. Otherwise, they would have put it differently. In fact, it would be much better if you wrote the forms in order to get the right information. But that's true whether it comes on the internet or on a piece of paper. There is definitely a link, because no two people are the same. You know that. Every client who comes through the door is unique, partly in the sense of the problem that they have, but largely because the circumstances in which they find themselves are always going to be slightly different. And the individuals concerned are going to have different skills in terms of being in the ability to cope with those problems. And I've met one or two recently, and I know that I've met many of you in various visits, and all of you have had stories to tell where the individuals can tell you exactly the moment when it started to make sense and you made a difference to their abilities to cope and transform their lives. So this is about people, but it is the art of listening and advising and the science of making the technology work. And you provide that link, and you provide it all over, wherever, Highlands and Islands, in the centre of cities. The advice, the inferences, the circumstances will all differ. I have a huge suspicion, I'm afraid, of statistics. And I know the bureaus individually do their own statistics. And I think from a bureau's perspective, they are really important. But when you put all those figures together at a central point, they don't say the same thing. And they don't say the thing that is relevant to those bureaus. But what your bureaus do and your understanding of those problems is absolutely key. And it is a responsibility of a national network to make sense of those statistics, because they have real value to add to what we know is happening on the ground. I'm hugely impressed that so many of you have wanted to come here today, and I hope that that reflects your pride as well as your commitment, which you already show in so many different ways, to citizens' advice as a network and as a very much a community-orientated bureau. And it is an opportunity. It says here that I've been patron for 29 years. I'll take your word for it. But they're always different and they're always new. And I'm always encouraged that people really recognize the value of what they offer. And if it makes you feel any better, I actually met a student. I'm pleased to say he was a law student, even better, who actually had been helping in his local citizens' advice in Nairn before he went to Edinburgh to study law, and he has now continued to do citizens' advice in Edinburgh. I actually think that all law students should be required to spend time in a citizens' advice, you know what I mean, because I think that is absolutely fundamentally important experience to understand what happens at the bottom when so many of the things they set up can tend to contradict each other. You have that, and I think you will find, and I hope you will find, there will be more young people who will find and recognize citizens' advice have a huge amount to offer them in the early stages of their career. Slightly irritating for managers that they might not be there for long periods of time, but they're terribly well educated and they probably come back. So maybe the future managers will benefit from that. But this is an opportunity to recognize quite what was achieved 80 years ago when they started, but I think justifiably proud not only of the continuity of that service, but maintaining that service and building on it in a way that you don't look to question whether the citizens' advice will still be here in 80 years' time, because you know it will have to be. So thank you all very much indeed for your efforts, and I'm delighted that today you're all having the opportunity of congratulating and celebrating through our National Volunteering Awards. But 80 years so far, and please enjoy today. Please enjoy what celebrating anniversaries can do locally for you. And please enjoy being part of Citizens' Advice, because you have every reason to be proud of what you've achieved.